Welcome to Hacking Hypermobility podcast.
I'm Luna.
And I'm Shelly.
And we're two bendy mamas.
Hacking Hypermobility.
So when we say hypermobility, what do we mean, Shelly?
Well, as I have recently learned, it is a spectrum of inherited disorders and it affects your connective tissue. And it's one of the biggest commonalities in joint hypermobility. And so what is hypermobility? It's bending beyond the range of like what your fingers can do. So I have a lot of bendiness here. See, I go down here, right?
Like in your fingers is what you're saying.
In my fingers and in my toes and in my elbow. I can turn my elbow all kinds of crazy ways, which is cool for party tricks. But doing that often can cause joint pain, stiffness, injuries. You'll eventually lose range of motion, and it can mess up your muscles and your ligaments. You're going to be tired even after you rest. You're going to be tired even after you wake up from a full night's sleep. And when you wake up, you're going to be stiff. Think of the Tin Man, and that's probably a really old, dated reference because I'm old. Poor balance and coordination. Your connective tissue holds your body up. It connects you, right? So if you have a problem with your connective tissue, everything that holds you together, this is genetic and you're born with it. And there's nothing you can do about it. But don't despair because we're going to help you.
So before we go further, I think it's important to note that both Shelly and I have something called the Ehlers-Danlos syndromes. We'll call it EDS.
Yep.
We'll probably focus most of our discussion on what people are diagnosed as the joint hypermobility syndrome or EDS, just because those JHS and EDS and the subtype of EDS called hypermobile EDS or HEDS are probably the biggest bulk of the inherited connective tissue disorders and those that we personally identify with. And they're the most common. But truly connective tissue disorders have really what we call systemic manifestations. So it's not just related to your joints.
So what are those comorbidities?
Well, there's a lot, Shelly. As you and I know, we don't have all of them, but we deal with a lot personally. But comorbidities are conditions that are seen frequently in people with hypermobility. So it's like a secondary diagnosis. And sometimes they're even worse than just your joint issues. So our disorder actually happens at the cellular level. It's not just a joint issue. So some of the conditions associated with the Ehlers-Danlos syndromes include some things that are kind of vague that you wouldn't necessarily think are most devastating to some of us have to do with either dysautonomia or autonomic dysfunction. The most common diagnosis seen in EDS patients, or sometimes not even diagnosed and missed, really is called POTS. It stands for postural tachycardia syndrome. We also tend to have skin issues, although skin issues vary across the spectrum with us, like a lot of these symptoms, but a lot of us have stretchy skin. If you're watching, this is a party trick I will do because it doesn't hurt me, but I have very stretchy skin.
See, mine doesn't quite do that.
But it's still beyond.
It's still beyond normal.
Yeah. We bruise easily. We're always covered in bruises. Shelly fought a chair recently and the chair won.
So coming up on a week.
It's not beaten. If you're not watching the video podcast, you should just go see us in this episode at least to see what we mean about the bruises.
Just for a minute, yeah.
Yeah, just for this. Widespread stretch marks, very young and in kind of odd places where you wouldn't expect to see stretch marks, and poor wound healing. Like it takes a long time for wounds to close, to heal. They may reopen, and you may even have abnormal types of scarring called mast cell activation or disorder, and it's related to like an allergic immune response. A lot of us have conditions affecting our oral structures, like our teeth and gums, that sort of thing. Very small mouths, high palates and stuff. Or we have deviated septums, those sinus issues, those sorts of things. This really isn't an exhaustive list because, as Shelley said, connective tissues are all over your body.
Yep.
So many of the connections still aren't fully understood or haven't even really been studied by medicine yet.
It's true. And that's actually one of the most frustrating things about this whole journey I've been on, and you and everyone, is that no one knows about it. And that's why people like you and me, who are not doctors, by the way, are here talking about it, because I don't see very many doctors out there talking about it.
No, that's one of the biggest problems, is there's a big lack of awareness for the hypermobility disorders and hypermobile EDS and Ehlers-Danlos syndromes in general. But then there's also a lack of medical support. So we'll talk more about it as we go, but that's really why Shelley and I are here talking to you, making this podcast and sharing what we've learned, but also hopefully to find out more information and kind of bring together all of the fragmented information to try to support those of us like us.
Yeah. And so you mentioned information and support, and I thought I heard you say you had come across some good information from Social Security the other day. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So I always try to stay on top of like news, medical studies and stuff that come out about us. But I actually missed the announcement, or maybe there wasn't one, that the Social Security Administration here in the United States gathered a committee to convene to study the connective tissue disorders. Well, this week they came out and they released their pre-publication of study that they did. So if you're not in the US or you're not that familiar with the Social Security Administration, that's the SSA, it's a national federal government organization, and it's involved in federal disability insurance and supplemental income programs for disabled people. The SSA is tasked an expert committee that they convene to evaluate and provide a report to them, to the government, on the major inherited connective tissue disorders, to provide current information.
Okay, current, good.
Yeah, which is important, regarding diagnosis, treatment, and prognosis of the inherited connective tissue disorders, as well as the effect of their disorders and their treatment on functioning. So they're interested in understanding how these disorders affect our lives and our ability to function, because they're the ones who make the determination whether or not to help disabled people. And they basically decide how disabled we are and whether we can be insured or supported with assistance and income.
Right. Well, that's great. But that report, okay, tell me more. But you said they released it. It's pre-publication?
So it's a pre-publication. So
Okay.
there's these like kind of legal documents that set precedents for that administration to approve disability claims.
Okay.
So that's just a preview of the committee's findings and conclusions.
Okay. So we will put that report in our show notes for this episode and our website. But it's 400 pages. Luna, give us the TLDR.
Well, first, I did read it. Because
you
I
did.
was excited, but also it's because I was at the physical therapy office waiting for my kid to finish, because it's an inherited disorder and guess who has it. So we were at PT, so I had an hour and I read it.
Yeah.
And I definitely just read the introduction and then skipped to their conclusions and findings because I kind of already knew all the other stuff.
Right.
And I didn't just immediately know it. I've done a lot of research over the past couple of years. But anyhow, they have a group of findings. I'm going to kind of read through them, but I wanted to read the introduction because it was exciting to me and just gave me a lot of hope. So,
I haven't read it at all. So
you didn't
he read it. I don't have to.
Well, I think just overall, I'm going to tell you my impression of this report is that I think we should be excited and hopeful that there was an effort, number one, to even convene people that are medical experts in this area. So, it brought attention to our complex medical issues for the purposes of managing our disabilities and maybe hopefully less red tape and more support.
That would be great.
But do I trust it would be easy to get disability support, especially in the United States? No. So the SSA's findings overall were encouraging. So I should say that the committee was looking at the most common connective tissue disorders, which includes Marfan syndrome, as well as the Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and some others. But those were the two that they focused on. If you download the document, the overall conclusions are all the way down in chapter 6, and it's like page 289. And I'm just going to kind of go over small little segments here because it's kind of a cumbersome document, but I think all of their findings were important. So I'm not going to skip any of them. We're going to go through them. So in their introduction, I'm going to start there. They give some interesting perspective that I think is important. Okay. So we've already kind of touched on some of this, but I'm going to read what they wrote.
Straight from the SSA's mouth.
Yeah, straight from the expert.
SSA's hired
medical professionals that convened, tasked by the SSA. Connective tissues, HDCTs, are how they reference them, are a group of inherited disorders that affect connective tissues throughout the body.
Okay.
Connective tissue is an integral component of all organ systems and plays a crucial role in their function. Hence, the physical and medical secondary impairments that manifest throughout the body and can affect functioning in every body system. That big point that we were making. And then in their introduction, it kind of gives you a hint as to where their findings go. But they say physical and mental secondary impairments associated with the HDCTs may develop and vary in severity over time. And the introduction was bigger, and then they break down each connective tissue disorder that they looked at in known research and diagnosis and clinical applications, all that fun stuff.
That's
but
great.
At the end, the report goes into like what I guess most of us care about, their conclusions.
Right.
So their first conclusion was this: the heritable disorders of connective tissue comprise a large and varied group of disorders in children and adults, and I'm glad they said children, that share the common feature of pronounced involvement of connective tissues, usually in multiple organ systems.
Mm-hmm.
The HDCTs can lead to a variety of physical and mental secondary impairments and associated functional limitations. That's key because they acknowledge
that is a gift.
Yes.
Functional limitations.
Yes. So they acknowledged it's physical and mental, that there are a lot of comorbidities, and that there are functional limitations. I feel so validated already. And this is like, what are we in the second point here?
Yeah, but like, okay, I have questions. This worries me. And I'm going to tell you why, because people are getting diagnosed. Well, no, it doesn't worry me because this is in their document about disability. I guess where I was going was I was afraid that they're going to say everybody has it, therefore nobody's disabled.
So you can't be impaired. Yeah.
That's so. Okay.
Well, the next sentence literally says impairments can range from minor to severe.
Okay.
And even life-threatening, and may fluctuate in severity over time in an individual.
Okay. All right. I feel better about that now.
What Shelley was concerned about, they addressed. And that's one of the most puzzling things, I think, to medicine, but also that contributes to the lack of awareness and effective treatment, and why we're missed. Is because of this variety and fluctuation. And so in terms of disability and assistance, the government is thinking mostly in terms of work and school. And they do address that functional limitations can affect participation in work, school, as well as social and recreational activities, and may include precautions, restrictions, that sort of thing. So they are acknowledging that it can range from, minor to severe,
right,
but even deadly, and we'll talk about that. That's something that we face.
Yep.
But that's just section 1. It's already, I think we're on a good path, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the second point is more specific to this in terms of the SSA.
Okay.
So some of the SSA's adult listings, and what they mean is what they have like codified as adult disability diagnoses.
Oh, I've been looking at that because I
Mhm.
recently applied.
Right.
So I know what you're talking
Applied
about.
directly to what are considered secondary impairments experienced by many individuals with the connective tissue disorders.
Okay.
And they could be used to evaluate disability in those individuals. Other listings with some modification may not be considered like full disability on its own,
Okay.
but could certainly apply to secondary impairments experienced by some of us. So what they're saying is like they're acknowledging this is a combination of issues for
Okay. Totality of the
patients like us.
circumstances.
Exactly.
Whole picture.
That's the key word. I'm going to repeat what you just said. Totality of circumstances. And it's very evident to me as we keep reading that not only are they interested in the totality of our circumstances, but also how did we get here? So, bullet point number 3, nearest and dearest to my heart, early diagnosis of the connective tissue disorders is important to reduce physical injury,
Yep.
reduce psychological harm to the individual and family members, and prevent the risks associated with inappropriate or fragmented medical care.
Yep.
That to me may be the single most powerful sentence written in this report.
Yeah.
Because that tells me these professionals
They recognize
that understand our disorders recognize how literally traumatic it is for a family, how disabling it is, and how lacking the medical care can be to support us. Yes.
Their eyes are open, it seems. So that's good.
Yes, definitely. So, you may be listening to us talk about like this could even be life-threatening, it's systemic, it's missed. And you're thinking, well, what can I do? Right? That's the question I get asked most often is there a cure?
It's genetic. There's no cure. What's the point?
Right. So although
There's a
curative
point.
treatments for the connective tissue disorders don't exist at this time, appropriate understanding and management of the disorders can still reduce the frequency and severity of their manifestations and resulting functional consequences.
Yep.
So just because there aren't cures doesn't mean there aren't things that we can do. And by things we can do, I mean as patients, but also things we in the community, those of us supporting these patients in the medical community can be doing things as well.
Yep.
So continuing with number 4, they also say that high quality care for an individual with inherited connective tissue disorders relies on effective coordination among a team of clinicians across a broad range of physical and mental health care disciplines who are knowledgeable about these disorders.
That would be nice.
Right. So that's why I was like, I'm waiting to see Shelley's reaction.
I'm like,
yeah.
yes, please.
Yes, that would be lovely. That is one of our biggest frustrations, trying to coordinate care. Just get care, find somebody who knows what they're dealing with.
Yeah.
Yeah. So number 5, bookending that, access to comprehensive multidisciplinary care for diagnosis.
When did you get in here? I have a cat in here. So, hold on.
The previous interruption was brought to you by Dinah, Shelley's cat. What Luna was trying to say was that access to comprehensive, multidisciplinary care for the diagnosis and management of connective tissue disorders can be limited by geography and other factors, including the availability of care teams with expertise in the disorders. Okay, let's continue.
So the 6th bullet point goes more into the problems with why we are lacking in clinical application.
Oh,
So
okay.
it says education about the heritable connective tissue disorders, including all of it, the multi-system manifestations, actual diagnosis, and management, is important for all clinicians to help increase recognition and earlier diagnosis and enable the provision of appropriate care.
They need to also include it, and I don't know if this isn't on SSA's thing, but sorry, the ADHD is just going to interrupt here for a second. You know where else that needs to be included? Like on, you know how they do the hearing screening at schools, like the hearing and eye screening in like second grade or something?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why aren't they doing hypermobility screening?
Your point, I have something to add on to that point. We miss perfect opportunities for screening. Yeah. One of the biggest opportunities for screening in the US is that in public school systems, we are doing vision screenings.
Yeah.
And that is one of the most obvious ways to see connective tissue disorders is in your eyeball.
Yep.
Also, we should be screening for hypermobility in the sports where people are found that are hypermobile. Gymnastics, dance, cheerleading, those sorts of things. But also, we haven't quite touched on it. We did a little bit. One of the big comorbidities that a lot of people seem to have their mind blown is what we call neurodivergence, and that's a neurodevelopmental disorder such as ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, sensory processing, and there's others.
Dyslexia and all that, right?
Yeah. We really should be. I would love to find some way to raise our voices to like request that there's a dual referral for those things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So tangent aside, the next thing is something that like I've thought about because I've been doing it myself and it's frustrating, but I'd never even thought about like, wow, how nice is it that they're acknowledging this? Education of individuals with the disorders and their families, as well as employers and staff, is important to improve the quality of life for affected individuals and their families, and to facilitate appropriate accommodations at work and school.
Beautiful. And
to help inform the disability assessment and determination process. Because I have recently gone through these things. I still work full time, and I had to go through some disability processes at work to get some accommodations. And then I was also doing that for my child as she's going from elementary school and up into middle school because of the demands being increasingly difficult for her disability.
Yeah, especially, and I don't know if this was a concern, like my daughter, her high school stairs are a big problem.
Yeah, and that's like when in their elementary, they're typically not in buildings that are that large that there would be stairs. Right. But here in middle school and high school, there are stairwells, and the kids aren't allowed to take the elevators.
Nope, you need a special key and a pass. And then when you have the elevator key, you get harassed by people. Right.
Yeah, and then also here, post-pandemic, they still don't use their lockers. So they're carrying their book bags full of everything they need for every class all day in between all 7 periods. Up and down the stairs. Anyhow, the 8th conclusion is something that I'm super passionate about and is definitely one of my special interests. Ongoing research on the heritable connective tissue disorders is important to advance understanding of the disorders and their effects.
Yep.
In particular, research on care services and interventions for the heritable connective tissue disorders and secondary impairments is needed. Like we said at the beginning, you said, hey, let's go over all those comorbidities. And I said, well, like, we can talk about them. Yeah, we can talk about them. This is a small list, but also like we don't really even know the whys or the exact links, and it hasn't really been studied. We just are all anecdotally discovering, oh, we all have this issue.
You just like broke my brain. So
right, and in such a good way.
It is good, but also it's like it's making me almost want to hit the wall where it's like so much, and then it's like I get excited, but then you like freeze.
It makes you feel excited, but like you're going to hit the wall in terms of what?
So when I first, I'm excited, but I feel overwhelmed because it's exciting and there's a lot of new stuff coming down the pike. It's just like, it's a spiral, right? Like, yeah, more people are learning. Yeah, more information. Yeah, you know, it's exciting, but it's just a little scary. And I think I'm only scared because I am super prone to hyper fixating on something and getting lost almost into a black hole. So I think I'm less prone to that now that I'm more aware that I'm prone to it. Awareness is key. But that's all. That's why it's exciting, but I'm like, meh. So anyway,
I think for me, having it all written in black and white and feeling, you know, first, oh, this is all very, really validating. These are things that like we've said and thought and discussed.
Yeah.
But then also, it was validating. Like there it is in black and white. Other people agree.
But I've been so right about so many things in my life and no one has given a fuck.
No one's listened.
So I'm kind of like, they're saying in black and white, yeah, da, 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 da. And then it's just going to be like, well, denied.
Well, and so that's the other thing that I worry about is like, okay, well, this is a pre-publication. So it's not like, are they still going to be hesitant to listen? And those problems are still there. It doesn't solve the problem by just saying it is a problem. The medical system moves very slowly. The government moves really slowly.
Yes.
You know, we're talking about a lot of disconnected things too that need somehow connected. Kind of a great allegory for our lack of connective tissue. Anyhow.
Yeah.
But you know, so like it's very hopeful to read all those things and like see it acknowledged, but then it also like spelled out and makes you realize like the actual state of our care and the awareness and diagnosis.
Yeah.
But there are other good things I've seen too, like the EDS Society, their newest studies, they got a big grant and they're studying some interesting things that like I thought were going to take forever to get acknowledged, the epigenetic aspect and adolescence.
Yeah, you're okay. You're right. I'm not being pessimistic. I've just always been more of a realist. Like,
me
awesome.
too. Yeah.
This is awesome.
But now let's come back down here because that's a group of, I forget how many people, but those are a group of people that are very educated on these issues.
Right.
So how's that going to filter out?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was a lot. Let's do we got any lighter content for this episode? Because you know.
Maybe you want to like let the listeners know more about like me and you.
Oh.
Are you comfortable with that? Can I ask you some questions?
I mean, I guess I signed up to answer some questions.
Sure, right?
Decided to do this, right?
Okay. Shelley, tell me a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, hi, I'm Shelley. I am, I keep mentioning that I'm old. I am a middle-aged lady of 45 years.
I don't like that word. We've discussed this.
I know. And that's precisely why I said it, because I love you. Let's see. I grew up, I'm a child of divorce, right? As most people, not about half people my age seemed to be. I grew up in Northern Virginia, where I spent most of my childhood. My dad got stationed to DC. He was in the Coast Guard when I was 5. And then my parents got divorced. So we stayed in that general area. So I am an East Coast girl, DC suburb kid, went to college at the University of Virginia and studied. I'm the first one in my family to go to college. So that was a big deal. Met my husband there. And let's see.
Wait, how old were you guys when you met?
So we met in 1997 when I was 20 years old. And it was just before his 22nd birthday we met.
Oh, cute.
Yeah. And we got married in 2001, 11 days after 9/11, which made my wedding very interesting.
And where planes weren't even flying and stuff, right?
Yeah, we were originally planning to have like 120 something people at our wedding, and we ended up, I think the final count was 85. Because a lot of cancellations and it was. Anyway,
sounds like my pain. damn it wedding that never happened.
Yeah. We have 2 children. They are almost adults, which is weird. My son's 20.
Still your children.
Hmm?
They're still your children.
They are, but it's, it's fun. I mean, it's always been fun in some way, shape, or form, but having adultish kids it's cool. Like, I'm enjoying it. And my daughter will be 17 in September. She's a junior in high school. I love cats, birds. I used to drink. I don't drink anymore. Well, that'll be a topic one day. I recently took up knitting. I'm super clumsy. I super like to be in charge. Today's my bestie's birthday, and she got me this shirt. And if you're on the video, I'm going to try to, it says, let go and let Shelly.
Just let Shelly.
Just let me do it. And there's a few reasons for that, and we'll get into that in a later podcast. I'm trying to think of one more funny thing to tell you, and you might not know it, Luna. When I was in college, I had a Class B CDL, and I drove 35-foot transit buses for my job.
I did not know that, and that's totally cool.
Yeah.
So, like, if we rent an RV,
yeah, I could drive.
Shelly's driving.
Awesome. But not at night.
That's fair. I can't see at night either. Also, did you know that's a thing in us?
Oh, yes. Yeah, that was something we didn't mention before. Yeah, lights.
I mean, because it's not a big deal, right? We just make workarounds.
What is seeing? I don't know if you guys can see if anybody is watching this, but how dark it is in my room. I like it like this.
I also like, everybody comes into my office and they're like, it's got a very nice vibe and mood in here. I'm like, yeah, the lights. I have like little lamps.
They're like, are you spooky? Like, what's happening?
I just can't take fluorescents. They give me migraines.
No, fluorescents are garbage.
Yeah. Also, it's less overstimulating. Let's tell our meet cute story.
Who wants to start?
Okay, so I'll say that one day my kids were bored during the pandemic, and they had been begging to do TikTok dances. So I allowed it. But guess what happened? I stayed on TikTok, and then I started making content. And then
I guess you saw a video of me.
Somehow TikTok puts people together, like with an algorithm. It somehow knows the people that you're like. And we'll touch on this. We think TikTok is magic for bringing together people like us.
Yes.
But it very much brought us together in a way that we both were like, huh? This is suspicious.
Did you say what you think you said? Did you mean it that way?
Yeah. So Shelly posted something.
I don't, and we will be posting this in the notes or on our website, this particular TikTok.
Can't find it. Yeah.
I have to go back and find it. I actually don't remember the original context. Like the first one.
I don't know what it was, but you said what
I ended up saying, I said, it had something to do with your job. So what I didn't mention in my intro is that, so I went to undergraduate school at University of Virginia and I studied anthropology, but I have a master's degree in forensic studies and forensic accounting because I investigate financial, like auditing, crimes, money laundering, stuff like that. That's my jam.
Cool stuff.
Yeah. And I mentioned it was right around the time, because neurospicy wasn't a hashtag that was always on TikTok, right? It was right around the time that neurospicy became like, right? Like, I feel like that was a relatively new hashtag. I just saw spicy and I was like, oh, I'm a neurospicy accountant or something, because neurospicy, and we'll get into it. I didn't mention this. I didn't tell you all of my diagnoses, and I'm not going to.
Maybe not. This would be terrifying.
Yeah.
Well,
but neurospicy is just kind of a broad generic term to refer to someone who is neurodivergent in one
but with
like
ways. mixed expressions of neurodivergence.
Yeah. So like more of a like
more spicy than just ADHD.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unbeknownst to me, spicy
in the TikTok world has a totally other meaning.
Go ahead and explain that, because I still don't know if I can fully explain it because I didn't know it.
In TikTok, there was this running joke about like people that were accountants. And I didn't understand it at first until I started seeing a pattern and realized they weren't talking about being accountants. Accountants on TikTok is a spicy way of censoring yourself to say that you do sex work, which I have no judgment.
I 100% support sex workers. I did not know that when I said I was a spicy accountant, right?
Right. And so
you stitched me. You stitched
so, like, I was on like two sides of TikTok. Like, this is like the mainstream pop culture stuff, which is where the spicy accountant jokes were. And then I was on the neurodivergent side of TikTok. And so I was like, I don't think she's this. I think it's more this. I think she maybe doesn't get the joke.
I did not get the joke.
So I asked, and I just wanted to ask and find out, are you actually a spicy accountant, or are you like an accountant? Turns out
it's just an accountant.
Which I really like math, so that I like that more. Maybe nothing against sex workers, I like them too, but I like math. So, and I also like investigating things and patterns and analysis. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was cool. But then we started noticing, that joke was funny, but like maybe like there was a connection for a reason here, right?
Yeah.
So what are like just some of the things off the top of your head that we started realizing, oh, we have that in common and that and that?
It was like I was looking at a Bizarro me. I can't even give you like one specific example.
Yeah. It was a Bizarro world thing.
It was the also.
Yeah, the obvious things, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So we found, discovered we had a lot in common, and we were both making content that we felt passionate about spreading awareness about the topics that we're discussing today. And so it really brought us together and this project together. So it's just kind of a funny, sweet rom-com moment. Yeah. So thank you, TikTok jokes.
Right? Thanks, spicy accountants.
So one of the things besides accounting that brought us together was, obviously the neurodivergence.
Yeah.
And hypermobility. So when was hypermobility first identified for you, Shelley?
Okay. So the first time I remember being told I was hypermobile or just bendy or jointy or whatever, was middle school, because I did cheerleading. And when we would do different dances or cheers or whatever, and you would need to straighten your arms or be bent a certain way. And I would straighten up, right? But like I would still be, I can't. So I would, you can see that, right? Like that.
Yeah. Her elbows.
I would
what we call hyperextended, folks. Yeah.
See, they're hyperextended now. So they would be like straight.
She can't make her arms straight for the life of her.
I'm like, they're straight. They're straight. What are you talking about? And she's like, no. So then I learned to not straighten all the way. So that it looks.
That was probably a really good lesson, actually, as someone that's dealing with really severe elbow problems. I wish I'd learned that.
It is, except no one told me I needed to wear like a brace also. So I just learned not to bend my arm, straighten my arms all the way. Was I still doing handsprings and cartwheels and doing a back handspring into the splits at the end of a cheer? Yes. Because I was good at that stuff because of hypermobile. So
that was definitely one of my party tricks, was doing these splits, but doing them to the point where like I would lift my feet off the floor and people would be like,
oh, I like to do that when I do my stretching and yoga, or when you touch your toes and I just lift my whole feet up off the floor and like they come up this, like if this is the floor and then they go, like I can even do this with my fingers. So and they were like up like that and they were like,
okay, but so it was identified then, but not
so it was
really.
Identified. Okay, it was identified, but not. And then it kind of went away. Like I never thought about it again.
I don't in the back of your head, really. It didn't really go away.
So then fast forward to 2007. and I'm 30 now, right? I have 2 children. 2007, my youngest was 5 and diagnosed autism spectrum disorder. Okay. And then my youngest wasn't eating any food. They were both in occupational therapy, right? And so they were going to do the therapy, and the kids were little, 5 and 2, right? And my daughter was sitting.
The flying W. Yeah. The flying W, folks.
Here
what
it is.
not to do.
Please don't do this. I'm doing it once. I'm not going to do it on this podcast again. Don't do that.
Yeah.
So my kids were sitting like that. And, I didn't think anything of it because I used to always sit like that, right? And so she was like, oh, kids have low tone, da 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 da. And she's like, well, they called it low tone. They called it poor core muscles, like weak, So I'm just like, oh, okay. So just do some ab work. It's fine. And then that wasn't fine. Because I'm the whole time thinking, well, IW's like whatever. So it was there, but not there, right? And we were mostly trying to treat, like, my son wouldn't
You had
cause
other concerns that were seemingly
right. So that was 15 years ago. And so it didn't really, it came up again last year, 2021.
How did it, like, what came up for you?
Well, I was finally going to get some answers. And I know we weren't going to go too deep into this, but I spent a long time trying to figure out what was wrong with me, because I literally felt like the healthiest sick person on the planet. Like, how can I outwardly, most of the time, present as a healthy, strong woman, right? That's what I look like. Like the other day, I was trying to make my bed and I couldn't lift 10 pounds. Like, but I used to bench press 100 pounds. It's like stuff like that.
Yep.
Oh my God, I forgot your question. So let's be
So when were you?
Yeah.
Okay. So, but
yeah. Okay.
Identified you when you were younger. You forgot about it. Came up with your kids. When were you diagnosed by a medical professional?
By a medical professional with EDS. Yeah, the diagnosis that was actually factually true. I was diagnosed November of 2021 by a geneticist at the Johns Hopkins Ehlers-Danlos Clinic.
And can we just do some quick math here? It's July 2022.
Yep.
It's not even been that long.
No, not even a year.
But let's remind our listeners. How old are you, Shelly?
I am 45.
Well, so you were 44 when this.
I was 44 when I got diagnosed, correct.
Shelly was 44 years old when she was diagnosed with a genetic, inherited, systemic disorder.
Oh, and by the way, my grandmother had a uterine rupture when she was in her early 30s that required emergency surgery and a brain aneurysm. She lived through that. She had to have emergency surgery to clamp it. I've told every single doctor when they ask my medical history. Oh, also, she went blind because she had glaucoma. We'll get there about that too. All of those things I told my doctors. And I told them all about my issues too. And none of them thought to think, do those things go together? No, they're fine.
And they are all clear warning signs for
very clear warning signs.
More dangerous variants of the Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
Yes. We've talked a lot about me. Like, I do
that. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's you do that. You do all the science and then you're like, nope, I'm done. No, you're going to tell us about you.
I do overshare though sometimes.
Well, I can rein you in or you can. I'm having so people, if you are watching this, I'm in my weird uncomfortable phase, and
I'm overstimulated because I have hair poking me in the forehead, and
and if I turn off my camera, it's because I have to take some medicine, and we'll talk about my medicine on another day. Anyway, tell us about you, Luna, while I take my medicine.
So I'm Luna. I am also middle-aged. I just turned 40 in March though. So Shelly does have me beat a little bit.
Yeah.
But so that makes her Gen X and that makes me an older millennial. So we relate, but I also sometimes don't.
My Seinfeld jokes are too much.
Yeah. But I watched Friends, so I get that. But so I also moved when I was younger. I was born in Detroit, but I moved to the South when I was about 10, and I was raised in the Nashville area. I went to college in North Carolina at a small school, and then I went back up north to Cleveland for further education, and I spent about a decade there. I studied both art and medicine with the intention of being a biomedical illustrator.
Ooh.
I am not that. I do still consider myself an artist. It's one of my passions, but I work in healthcare as a profession, but it's not my biggest passion. My biggest hyperfixation or passions are probably my other things that I do. I'm a very creative person. I do write and I do comedy. I also still sometimes do visual art, not as much as the people around me who think I'm wasting my time. And I do family genealogy on the side. I've been doing family history and genealogy for about 30 years.
So were you old school with the library with the
I was
micro?
a child in the library doing genealogical research. But I've been doing it professionally for maybe about a decade.
Very cool.
I come from a family of various ethnic backgrounds and immigrants, so I'm kind of a mutt, but I have a lot of childhood trauma also, which is very interrelated with having disability and being not neurotypical.
Yep.
I was diagnosed as a child with ADHD.
Oh, you were? I did not
Yeah.
know that.
And as a child, I struggled a lot with the disability stuff, other traumas and difficulties. So it's very hard for me to separate how those interplay. And so trauma is one of my special interests,
Yeah.
as is psychotherapy and the mental health aspects of our stuff. And in the past couple years, I've undergone a religious deconstruction, and I'm very interested in spiritual pathways and healing related to that. And I think that's one of the reasons why you and I relate, because we're interested in those
Yeah.
other modalities to serve us, and allow us to live beyond just our disability. And I think that's probably my biggest passion, is bringing awareness to this so that we can be more functional parts of society and to live in our higher purposes and contribute. And that brings me to my number one passion. I am a mama and trying to make a happy, healthy human. I spend most of my time and effort on that part of my life.
Yeah.
That was not a little bit about myself. I think that was a lot bit about myself.
Well, that's fine because I said a lot about me. So.
And I didn't even say the rest of my family. I feel bad. I like to go out and enjoy the nature when I'm physically able. I like the forest. That's my happy place. I like botany and
I'm getting into plants a lot lately.
I like
I'm trying
plants
to
and
become a
mushrooms.
suburban witch or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm obsessed with all that stuff. I research a lot about it because there aren't drugs for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I
forgot. Again, not talking about the people in my family, talking about special interests. That's me.
See?
That's what I do.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm also autistic. Yeah, I found that out.
That's important.
Yeah, that's well, okay, so wait a minute. I don't think it's the most important thing about me.
Oh, no. It's not the most important thing about you.
But it's probably important to this conversation.
Oh, no.
This overall conversation that we're having. So I wanted to clarify what Sally was saying. I knew what she meant, but listeners may not have known. Yeah.
Okay. I forget that not everybody is in this chaotic brain. I mean, can we just get with the telepathy so I could just send a message and just be like, blink it and just be like, it's done. No,
I
we don't
told you
want
I'd gone through a spiritual awakening. I can probably get the message.
I mean, probably, but now
And I
that's
probably have enough trauma and hypervigilance that I will have already predicted what you're feeling and going to say before you feel and say it. So fair.
I mean, I got a little bit of that going on, but you know what? Before we get into that, you didn't tell me when you first found out you were hypermobile.
Okay. So, like you, it was a development, right?
Yeah.
My warning signs and symptoms started in early childhood, but when it became very difficult was pre-adolescence.
Okay.
And very, very difficult in adolescence. But I was the first like physical manifestations that a doctor or a medical professional noticed were actually in childhood. They didn't know. Like you could tell they didn't know. So like
Right.
I was in and out of PT physical therapy a lot because I was a soccer player and was having a lot of injuries. And I really just couldn't even like stay on the field and stay practicing and stuff. And, you know, the physical therapist that was working with me, I remember that conversation. I was like 12, and I remember the PT saying, like, your joints are really unstable. And like kind of the things that they were trying to teach me, it's not quite as advanced as like what maybe a PT would understand or do now.
Right.
But I remember
That
going,
sounds
like,
familiar. I
being
always had
sent to
those little
get,
sprains that
yeah.
were like,
But I
yeah.
remember being sent to get like orthopedic shoes.
See, I didn't get that.
And
I think you're bendier. You've got more. You're looser than me in some places. So
when
I
I
think,
do, I'm like I have hip dysplasia and
yeah,
stuff. But but they never really quite got it. And then when I was actually younger than that, I was like 10, and my mom actually got so offended by this ENT that she fired him because he was looking at me and said, "I don't see things like this except in drug addicts." And she took offense to it, like understanding it, like you're calling my 10-year-old a drug addict.
Oh, but
And
that
he
was
was
the only
actually
way
just
he could describe it.
he was actually just saying, like, I can't even place like or explain to you how severe this is, except to say, like, I don't see this except in people who've like damaged their bodies with drugs.
So
Like
instead
he
of
was trying to express the severity of it, and her
so she heard
never
your daughter's
diagnosed
a drug
autism.
addict.
She heard something else, and so she fired him. But he was basically saying, like, this is really like
And
different.
so if she hadn't done that, you could have had some. You could have.
I probably would have had the ENT surgeries that I needed younger. I didn't have those until my late 20s. But that's an aside. But my point was there were doctors and medical professionals that had noticed things, but maybe misdiagnosed or didn't diagnose. And like when I was a teenager and being evaluated, you know, all they could come up with was ADHD, but they thought there was really something else going on because I had such severe anxiety and depression.
Right.
I was not diagnosed with autism until I was 39.
Okay.
But so anyhow, like then, you know, I went about my life and I really ignored a lot of my medical stuff. I really ignored a lot of things in life. That's how I functioned. Truly. I mean,
push me aside and see what I can do for everybody
ignore
else
the
around.
pain. Ignore the pain. It's not there. Until like I really couldn't. I was in my like mid-20s and my back was just in so much pain. Like, you know, I had seen my primary about it and they'd done x-rays, and all she could say was that like it had a weird hinge to it, like, and my muscles were over, you know, compensating. And so she tried giving me muscle relaxers. And then I destabilized.
Right, because that'll loosen you right up. And
yep. And so she sent me, so I went and saw a DO who did adjustments, and she adjusted me, and it helped, but it didn't really stay. So, you know, I was doing physical therapy, all those things. But the DO that had seen me said that I had really severe pelvic instability. And that's why when she adjusted me, you know, it helped with the pain, but why it kept returning and why my muscles remained very very tense and damaged. And it was so bad that it was curving my spine, sideways.
Yikes.
And so that's when I was first identified with some different spinal curvatures. I'd been identified as having mild scoliosis as a child.
Okay.
But that's when they first noticed that I was having variable spinal curvatures that depended on my current state. And so like I got those kind of weird diagnoses. And there were lots of other things. I mean, so many other things and various body systems.
I would have like one in 6th grade. I like went to the eye doctor and I needed glasses, and then I didn't need glasses after 8th grade.
And then I had very early myopia and very
progressive. And then my mom accused me of faking it because I wanted to wear glasses. Like she thought I thought glasses were cool.
Yeah. And I had one of the signs of another type of connective tissue disorder I have that we haven't mentioned is called Stickler syndrome. And it's also a sign of EDS is very severe early myopia. And I do carry the brittle cornea genes, as does my daughter. I don't have the like known
are you talking
the one that's published, but there have been studies on it and they do identify it as brittle cornea. So anyhow, that's a whole other issue. But like that's what I'm saying is multiple specialists have said, hey, there was something, but nobody ever said the word hypermobility until I was about 35 years old. And I was in hip PT for like, I don't know, probably the 17th time of my life, maybe more. And I won't name the physical therapist, but she actually said, like, I'm kind of bendy, but don't do that again. Like I physically made her disgusted. And like by like in assessments and like how I was moving and like I was there for hip mobility and she said, I'm actually really more worried about your shoulders. Well, sure enough, eventually my shoulders are a very big problem. Yeah. So she was right. But also, so she literally said to me, have you ever heard the term hypermobility? And I was like, well, no, except maybe like they kind of said that my hips were my pelvis was unstable.
Right.
And she's like, but you've never heard of it in terms of like an overall thing? And I was like, no. She's like, will you please discuss this with your primary? And so I did. And like she had sent a report and my doctor was.
And when was this? How old were you when this?
I was like 35, 36 maybe. So my doctor was in private practice. She wasn't part of this big hospital system.
Okay.
And so I did. And my doctor was also my daughter's doctor. And this is important to the rest of the story. And I'm trying to make this quick. But so anyhow, I asked my doctor about it. And she's like, no, that just means like you're overly flexible. You're just, you have, the joint issues. I'm like, okay. I just accepted it and kept having devolving symptoms.
Yeah. So you mentioned a key word there before you said hypermobile and you said unstable. And so I had some knee problems.
Instability.
Well, so I had some knee problems after I decided to take up running because I'm the type of person.
Oh yeah, I did that too. I did that too.
I'm like, I've never been able to run. What's wrong? I'm going to make myself run.
I'm going to do it. I'm going to.
And I did. And I was like breaking myself apart. But I had this knee injury, right? And I remember, I went to the doctor. They sent me to PT. I got a little brace thing. But what they said was, the joint's unstable. Do these exercises and it'll help improve or blah, blah. Like what I heard, and now I know this as an autistic person with communication issues, and it's, I heard do these exercises and it'll feel a little bit better. And the problem's gone. Problem's gone. Yeah. Oh, I'm going to stabilize it. I did my exercises.
Exactly. My body's going to let me stabilize it. Truth of the matter is,
never going to happen.
You may develop better postural control and habits. Mm-hmm. You may strengthen yourself to give you a little more stability, but you're never going to be stable.
No. And that was key information that had I known that, because that injury was after I ran my first Ragnar race, which we'll talk about that one day.
That's a big, long run, in case y'all don't know.
That was 10 years ago.
Yeah. And I also was pushing myself with physical fitness and endurance. And I thought one of my things was I'm going to run a marathon. And then I realized I was having so many injuries and so much pain and problems. I switched to the water. So I was doing really intense weightlifting. I mean, like men were intimidated. I can lift.
Good. Oh yeah, I'm strong when I have, if I
Yeah,
can actually grip a
like
barbell.
my part. It hurts me to lift my mug, like to drink.
Yeah.
But anyhow, like, so yes, I did the same things. And like when you're in your, I don't know, 30s or whatever, you think like, oh, I'm like, I need to take care of my body and this is how you do it.
Right.
And I want to keep up with everybody else. Maybe even more so.
Right.
Anyhow, so I was like living the fitness life and all that. And then a lot of things happened for me, like in my life, that the pandemic happened. And so I lost my physical coping. And I was coping because I had water cardio, which is amazing for us. And I didn't even know it, but I was taking care of myself. I had bar and Pilates and I had weightlifting. And it was like holding me together, but also mentally. And then
that sudden change of routine was debilitating.
Yes, but also like I could not, like I tried doing physical activity and exercises at home, but it was not stable enough for me. So I developed more injuries.
Yep.
And then at the same time, my daughter, when she was 10, got very, very sick. And she developed a migraine that didn't go away for about 9 or 10 months of her life.
Yeah, I remember.
She's a child. She's so part of that they were still in school, and then some of it we were, at home because of this pandemic. And so we spent a lot of time going to the doctors, a lot of time trying to figure out what was wrong, doing scans in and out of the children's emergency department. And even migraine cocktails weren't helping her.
Man.
And so my primary care doctor is also hers. And, we're just like at our wits' end and begging for help. And I was divorced, but she sat us down, my former husband, her father, with her in the room and said, maybe it's just anxiety or depression and she needs to see a psychiatrist.
You fired that doctor, right?
I fired her.
Okay.
And then the next time she was in the pediatric emergency department, the attending physician was a long-term, employee, had been a pediatric emergency medicine doctor for quite a long time. So keep in mind, this is an emergency medicine doctor. They're not generally adept at seeing these things.
Right.
And he was like, she's been in here how many times? Migraine cocktails don't work. And, we've done brain MRIs. There's some slight abnormalities, but there's like no glaring tumor.
Right.
And, we've done all sorts of labs, and she had some kind of weird labs. She did have like positive ANA, which indicates a possible autoimmune thing. And she's been seen by a rheumatologist who did all the other testing and said, well, she doesn't have an immune disorder. Anyhow, so this emergency room doctor, who did have some long-term experience, though.
Sounds like it.
Said, I really think she needs to go back to rheumatology. I think her neck is too unstable. And I think that's what's causing it. And I was like, that makes complete sense. Now, keep in mind, I get migraines. I didn't so much as I think I did as a child, but now I realize, or what they've told me is except they were considered abdominal migraines. So like, I think we were getting both kinds.
What kind of
They're called abdominal migraines, like with the nerves are stimulated there for some weird reason.
Wait, you need to talk about those.
I don't even know how to describe it accurately without having it in front of me.
We're gonna put a pin.
We're gonna pin in that, and it's also complicated. But so like I have been dealing with migraines, but part of my weird migraine thing was that I seem to have like different kinds of migraines, and sometimes it would respond to medication and sometimes it wouldn't. And I had been telling my doctor, who's the same doctor, that sometimes when my neck and my shoulders are really tense and they hurt really bad, I get migraines. And all she told me to do was stop lifting so hard that my trapezius muscle was giving me migraines. That was her answer.
Stop
that was her
moving.
answer.
Stop trying to be a living human.
Now I also know that I have an unstable neck. Anyhow, so that's when I started. That's when like he connected the dots for me. Now you should know, in case you missed this, I have medical training. And I had actually looked this up already. And I had found recently, in context of that conversation, information about EDS. But in the background, I thought, no, because like it would be worse, right? It would be worse. Not at all acknowledging the fact that she had had a 9-month migraine, but I was thinking worse overall. And I didn't, like, my child is very, very bendy and has other signs.
Yeah.
But that was her complaint. She hadn't yet had other serious issues.
My daughter's primary complaint about that age was headaches.
Yeah.
That's something that I want to bring up. And if any of our listeners can identify, I just want to let you know you're not alone, because you said something that I identify with, but in a different way. You just said you had medical training and you should have known, like it was.
I gaslit myself. Like I've heard, like I had heard enough.
Yep. You'd have been shut down enough.
The answer. And then when I read about it, I thought, well, I feel like I'm too healthy.
You'd been shut down enough to like, just be like, no,
I've been very severely medically gaslit by my own family. And
also because of that, even when you do complain, you minimize.
Yeah. Yes. And also and I see this very well in my child, when we express our experiences, we struggle to process feelings, including pain.
Yep.
And we struggle to communicate. And so we struggle to properly, in quotes, communicate what we're physically experiencing. And also there's a physical disconnect, because when pain is that severe, your brain and your body go, we're not going to talk about this anymore because it just hurts too bad. Okay. We're not friends.
Yep.
And so doctor said Ehlers-Danlos syndromes.
Oh.
And I said, that's interesting, because I kind of read about that. And I thought, well, that could, but maybe not. And he said, I'm gonna have you see a different rheumatologist that is more aware of connective tissue disorders. And so long story short, Evelyn was diagnosed with severe neck instability causing her migraines. And they did an evaluation. They took our family history and they said, yes, she has joint hypermobility syndrome. I asked about genetic testing and they said, no, we don't really think that's necessary. Then I started doing more research. And I started getting more concerned about my own symptoms and our family histories. And you've already touched on some of those red flags.
Yep.
And so long story short, they refused genetic testing. And I said, well, I'm going to show them. And I had her grandparents' DNA, because what did I say my other special interest was? Genealogy.
Ancestry. Yep.
So because I do genealogy, of course, I do genealogy on our own family. And I used her grandparents' DNA and I took their data with their consent to a place where you can transport, bring your own data and use their software to view medical genome information.
That's awesome.
And I taught myself genetics.
I'm in the process of learning and I will be reaching out to you, I'm sure.
Yep. And I, in my head, as I was learning more about hypermobile EDS specifically, because that was the suspect, I found out that there were other types of the Ehlers-Danlos syndromes and other types of connective tissue disorders. And so once I found out that there was more to it and that there were more variants and there were more concerning variants, I had already had some preconceptions about where it came from in the family. And I
Right.
thought, well, I'm bendy. My dad is super bendy. Like one of the running jokes is, his circus tricks, he can put his feet behind his head. And I can still do that. And I'm a 40-year-old chubby woman, by the way. I'm just saying, like,
I can get
it should
I
be
can get my
obvious.
foot to about here.
Yeah.
I
I can chew
never
my
could.
toenails too. I mean, I
I
don't.
did.
I don't. I don't do that.
I did when I was a kid.
I did too. I don't do that now. I swear. I don't. I chew my nails now sometimes, but I don't chew my toenails. I feel like people are never going to believe me now. Anyhow, so moving on.
I believe you.
So when I opened that up, I looked at my dad's first, and sure enough, there were all these genetic variants. And I was like, so I prepared this little report and I started taking line by line the parts of his genetic code and putting that in a report to send to her doctors. And it was very, time consuming and tedious. And so I thought, God, do I really want to look at this one? Because it's not my mom's not going to have anything on it. I opened hers.
Dun, dun, dun.
She has. So I should clarify, both of my parents have pathogenic variants. I have multiple Ehlers-Danlos syndrome variants now genetically diagnosed.
Yep.
So I wasn't surprised by my dad's, but when I opened my mom's, she has the most pathogenic variant, as well as other variants. And she was the source of my recessive inheritance of several other EDS variants.
We'll talk about her another day. But
that's a whole other thing. But so part of the reason is in different variations of the connective tissue disorders, they don't all present the same. And in her variant, which is, we call it vascular EDS, but she also has arthropelagic EDS, which I inherited. So she's kind of mixed in her presentation. Her hypermobility is generally in her fingers and her toes. And they are very, very, they're more hypermobile than me. Like we would always laugh at her because she would put her toes under her feet in a weird way, like that. And I also, I had very long toes, but that was never comfortable to me, even though they're very weirdly bendy. Yeah. But she would sit there like that and we would be like, ew, But, and then she also has very severe neck instability. She's actually 2 spinal fusions. But I didn't, because of my preconceptions of all this.
Same. I had preconceptions too.
The blame's all of it on being fat.
Well, that's what doctors like to do too. So, yeah. But my dad would just tell me, oh yeah, your Aunt Nancy just had some fuses and the nerve issues and the degenerative discs. And I was like,
what? Yeah. And and also it's very obvious in our families. Yeah. Not only that, but the neurodivergence that goes along with it is probably more debilitating, to be perfectly honest. And more widespread. Everybody in my mom's family, I would say, is just about autistic, but not all of them are dealing with severe hypermobility. The women are. The men, it's not as severe.
Tea helps them.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But so anyhow, I mean, that's a good point, is that it does vary across
it's a lot of
gender expression and hormone expression. Yeah. But so anyhow, I was not formally diagnosed until after my child was diagnosed. So I took those reports in great shock. And I mean, I probably wasn't that demanding. I'm going to be honest. I gave them a report and I said, please consider genetic testing. Here's why. Okay. And so they would not accept that to diagnose her, because obviously that's not what she inherited. But given the widespread
risk factor.
Yes, given the widespread information combined with our family histories and clinical presentations,
odds are going on.
They then did say, okay, you know what? We're going to fit you in 3 months. So it went from a 2-year wait to overnight.
So that's good. But you were going to do something else too, right?
Yes. So when they test, so they don't generally, they will send off a sample to a lab and they're going to test what they call a panel of genes. And so they're going to test a small selection. And there's different panels depending on how your doctor orders it, by the way. And so they tested a narrow
So would that be
panel.
like, let me get some clarification. So would that be like, if I go to the doctor and I get a blood test and they order a CBC and a lipid, like a CBC and a lipid test, that's two different tests. So even though they take my blood, if they do the CBC but not the lipid panel, I will never be able to know what my lipids were.
They don't know the rest of the story, right?
Okay, so that's what they did. They're just taking a tiny bit and testing for tiny.
So they're only going through those portions of the genome. So that's what they did. They tested her, and then they were like, okay, these are the genes we identified. Now we want to test the parents. And so it's like $150, like a gene, a test.
Per
and so
gene?
anyhow,
per gene?
Per like panel. And it's like $50 per gene. So they were like, well, we could test just like these couple concerning genes on both of you, and it would be like $50 each. Or we could do a couple more panels, and it would be like $300 because it's $150 each. But so anyhow, so as I've been waiting, I tested myself. And I use a company that does a full genome. None of this, like I just went outside of my insurance. I paid for it when I was on sale.
Yeah.
And I was, again, had a moment of being stunned. And I still wrestle with it. And one of the things that I found is a gene. And so like, and then I consulted with a geneticist. Like, so let me clarify. Like, then I took that to geneticists, different than the one my child sees, but very knowledgeable. And they identified that I have something that used to be considered an EDS diagnosis, but is X-linked in presentations. And it was declassified because they see it more as a neurological disorder. And my daughter's brain MRI shows all of it. Anyhow, so
what's it called?
Come to find out, that panel that they did not include this gene. So then I was like, you know what? That thing's on sale again. And so I have ordered, the tests to do it at home and then send it off to the lab to look at my daughter's entire genome. Because on sale, it's probably going to cost less than if we keep doing panels.
100%. And you'll have it. You'll have the whole thing.
And I'll have it. Instead of trying to like wait on her dad, who, like I already mentioned, we're divorced. I have no control over the man, but I need to be able to know how to treat my child effectively.
100%.
So anyhow, that's our next adventure in this. But so in that process, I tested myself. I saw a geneticist. I got diagnosed. I was 39. I was towards the end of my 39th year. I found out all those things. And here we are still waiting on getting my little one, the support that she needs. And that's my driving force, because I think back to all those things we talked about where like it's kind of like noticed, but not really effectively managed.
Same.
And I think a good point in this is that we can be proactive, even though we are middle-aged, and many of us are not diagnosed until middle-aged. The average age of diagnosis, is unfortunately our age. So like, I think that brings up, really good segue into our next episode. I think that's what we need to talk about next is diagnosis. We already kind of started touching on it, but
a little bit, but it's a lot going on. So we hope you stick around for that next episode.
Yeah, I don't know that we can top this.
That's a lot going on.
Yeah, that was a lot. But so thank you so much for sticking around, listening to all that, and listening to the Hacking Hypermobility podcast. We do appreciate you hanging out with us.
Yep. If you can take a minute to share this podcast or follow us and leave us a review and help us grow, just to spread the awareness. If you're a fellow zebra, we would like to hear from you, and please share the love.
Yeah. So wishing you healthy hypermobility and have a happy day, zebras.
Have a happy day, zebras. Bye.
Bye. Really, Abby?